Hi, everyone. This is Tech and EdTech. In this podcast, we discuss technology that powers education and improves learning for all. Welcome to today's episode. I'm your host, Dan Gizzi from Magic EdTech, and our format has changed a bit today, and I have the privilege to welcome two guests, not just one. Today we have Andrew Lippert, CTO from McGraw Hill Education, and Acky Kamdar, CEO from Magic Education, joining us. Acky, Andrew, thanks for joining me, and welcome to today's show.
Thank you, Dan.
So, Andrew, we're going to start with you since you're the real guest on the show, not to downplay you, Acky. But Andrew, so you've got quite an interesting background. I'd love to hear how you got your start in ed tech. Quite a ways away from your time in the Navy. So, we'd love to just give you a chance to tell our audience how you got into ed tech.
Certainly. So, I've been doing education technology for about 20 years now. Had the privilege of working with Cheryl Vidot, who headed Apex Learning, right about the time Paul Allen was losing his interest in specifically ed tech and moving into the brain science endeavor. But that engagement wound up being an extended period of time rebuilding solutions, re-entering markets, and expanding capabilities. And I've been enjoying ed tech ever since, a variety of different flavors, from business education to now at McGraw Hill, where obviously we have a very broad spectrum of solutions across both the K to gray market space, but U.S. and internationally. As you mentioned, I come to education technology kind of naturally and self-interestedly. I was a pilot in the Navy for a decade and wound up with 6 kids. So I have a very deep interest in making sure the education solutions out there serve the needs of our students and produce effective learning outcomes, because I need those kids to move on.
That's such a great introduction, and I'm a former Red Q proud McGraw Hill employee as well. So it's great having you join us here today.
My pleasure.
Acky, your turn. I'd love to hear how you got here.
I would say that I've got such an illustrious background in EdTech. I joined EdTech sometime in 2014 by way of my investment in Magic Software. Magic as a company has been around since 1989. My previous background has always been in technology before I came here. I used to be in Wall Street, and I used to think that, in Wall Street, we are the masters of the universe. We created technology that powered the world. I think after coming into education, I have been humbled. I think the impact or the potential to create impact in the edtech world is massive. And since the time I've been here, I've learned a lot about inclusivity, accessibility, and diversity, equity, inclusion. That is so key to our education world, and how EdTech can help make that happen.
Yeah, it's amazing how the journey into EdTech for people is always through other avenues, it always seems. And it's great to hear both of your backgrounds here. And, starting with Andrew, would love to just understand a little bit about, with your leap into EdTech and from the support for the initiatives for affordability and access, how does your background, as CTO, lead some of those decisions that are happening, not only just for your 6 kids, but for all of the children of the world that are in education.
Right. I am fortunate. I've got a very interesting seat at the table, you could say, because our breadth of solutions and the markets we serve are so diverse and broad. So we touch a spectrum of students that few education technology companies have the privilege of serving. And of course, that spectrum spans many different vectors, from socioeconomic to ability to diversity of culture. And as a result, we always have forefront in our plans and in our implementations the needs of those students in mind, not just from an equitable access perspective and an affordability perspective, but also, as Acky mentioned, from an accessibility perspective, ensuring that the solutions are able to be leveraged by people of all abilities. the initiatives within the organization consequently touch on a whole spectrum of technology solutions, things you don't necessarily think about, like the purchasing workflows, how you register, enroll, and title a piece of courseware, how the payment for that curriculum resource, the learning solution, is actually adjudicated. We've been staunch supporters and have very successfully deployed something that we call inclusive access, which allows in the higher ed space students to have immediate day one access to their learning materials without having to worry about whether there's enough money in their bank account to have to choose between a beer fund or a learning experience. The cost of the solutions get rolled right into their tuition, making for a much smoother on-ramp for those individuals. And it's delightful for the instructors as well. And all of our educators are appreciative of that program, as it gives they know day one, all of their students are going to have all the materials they need to actively engage with the learning experience that they're ready to produce. So it's an interesting position. I get a lovely seat to kind of orchestrate a bunch of different types of conversations and ensure that from a technology perspective, we're building solutions that work for all of our users.
That's great to hear. And I think there's a couple of things in there I want to unpack a little bit later once we get into them. Acky, from your perspective, you have a slightly different seat at many tables when it comes to the work that you do with Magic, also the work that you do as part of your other ventures outside of the education space. When it comes to affordability and accessibility, what are some of the things that you're seeing as trends pre-pandemic that have now morphed into ultimately, this different place we are in now, almost hopefully coming into being able to say post-pandemic?
First of all, Andrew, the insights that you provided is amazing, and I can understand how you see the world. I think I don't differ very much from how you see it. For me, technology is a big enabler, and it kind of empowers learners with different abilities to come up to speed at their own pace. At the heart of everything that we do, we are here to help a learner become more efficient at learning the subjects that they want to pursue. So I think learner efficacy is at the very heart, and to allow each person to learn at their own pace is important. And technology allows us to find the learner where the learner is, and then provide them learning material in the manner, in the format, in the media that they are most comfortable with. And this does not discount what may or will continue to happen in a classroom, and what a teacher can do in a synchronous class model. But I think it allows us to explore different avenues to teach learners. So I think to me, technology is an empowering tool.
It's a really great point, Acky, and one that I emphasize with my teams regularly. The technology enables capabilities that you just couldn't do any other way. Imagine an instructor in a classroom with 30 students trying to individualize instruction and personalize the experience for each of those students, meeting them where they are on the educational path. That's a lot to ask of an educator. So traditionally, the classroom has been kind of melded toward the middle, if you will. I'm teaching to the center of my student population. With our EdTech solutions, we're now able to actually hit each of the points along that path and meet the students where they are, exactly as Aki's saying. And the counterpoint to that that I have with my teams is that the technology needs to be transparent as well, so that we don't get in the way of the learning moment or impede the outcome. We need to support and extend the opportunity to really make efficient that learning objective and outcome.
Yeah, and that seamless technology, making it work without people knowing it's working, was no small feat, at least on your part and the company's part of McGraw Hill. An industry that was not built to be driven by technology was built to be driven by textbooks for so many years. when you're
lots of trees,
sitting, lots of trees, that's for sure. Even and lots of pressed CDs that were going to replace the trees. That's how old I am in this industry.
That's right. I had a two spindle burner at one point. I could do 2 CDs at a time. It was great.
That's right. We were going to replace textbooks with them. I remember.
Yep.
But there's a lot of decisions that go into that massive shift and pivot that had to happen in the industry to get it to where it is today. So when you're sitting down and thinking about that next great pivot, the adaptive learning, the personalization was another one that took place. When you're sitting down and just thinking about that, with a CTO hat on, and obviously I'm going to ask you when you feel like that with a parent hat on too. What are some of the things that you're looking at from a strategy and transformation perspective? We have to go blow it up to make this the future, but without disruption of too much of that. I think you said some good things about the teachers as well. I'd love to hear just a little bit around that. And then Acky, I'll ask, if you could just give your opinion on that as well.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about McGraw Hill is that we've got a tremendous amount of depth. The curricular materials at our disposal, the library of resources that we've created over time are mammoth. And the thing about personalized education and adaptive learning is that it's not so much about the technology. The algorithms and machine learning opportunities, those are all sexy opportunities from a technologist perspective to really get in and play with cool toys to deliver outcomes. But the important bit is the curricular resource, the curriculum, the actual learning materials, and how you can deliver them in appropriate ways. But if you don't have sufficient mass of those curricular materials, you don't really have anything to personalize. If you've only got one path through a learning trajectory, personalizing that, it means going backwards and forwards a little bit. It doesn't mean branching or exploring or addressing the needs of a reader who's still struggling to comprehend some of the vocabulary, or going back and teaching a student about 2-digit addition and carrying. You've got to have enough teaching material to make the personalization real. So the beauty from my perspective and where I sit is that McGraw Hill has that library, and it's a very wide moat for entrants and new entrants into the EdTech space to cross, because of the production required. The amount of investment needed to build that kind of corpus is phenomenal. It's almost unfathomable given the history of this company. So there are technology companies and new entrants to the field in the startup world that I acknowledge their struggle. It's a difficult industry to penetrate with technology solutions around personalized learning, adaptive learning, machine learning models, because that's not sufficient. It's necessary. The technology's a critical component of it, but it's not the totality of the solution. And it's one of the reasons we like working with Magic as well. You have the experience on both sides of that equation. Not only are you software developers, but you also understand the content creation aspects, and that the learning moment is a combination of those things.
I just want to add to what Andrew just talked about. I think it's one of those topics that I had hosted in one of the conferences. What comes first, content or platform? And we had about 20 participants in the room, and everybody debated very aggressively, and we referred to the HBO model, where content or what you have on the platform is more important, how the platform plays, and then Apple comes along with Apple TV and makes a lot of those things irrelevant, because the interface is more important, and how the platform delivers the content to you becomes more important to you. But at the end of the day, when you look at the fatigue levels today with all the streaming media, you still go back to the content. And so in some ways, Andrew, thank you for the perspective that you brought to the table in the way you talked about curriculum and how it becomes important from providing the personalized learning. One of the things, obviously, when you're looking at the play of technology, especially from when I look at future and I look at inclusive access. I must say that the last 3 years of pandemic taught us a lot of things. As we are going back, we are questioning a lot of our models. One big thing that came out during the pandemic also was the disparity, which we saw amongst the student population, and even amongst the school districts. We saw that there was that equity was not there, whether it was in the technology access or the learning skills or teaching skills as well. And I think as we going back to classrooms and schools, we are taking a lot of those learnings back into incorporating into our technology. Hybrid learning has become the center. And I think accessibility by design and diversity, equity, inclusion is the main topic of conversation in all the products that we are working with our clients. I think it's an important element in the learning efficacy for the students as well. Because if the students are not able to engage with what you're delivering to them, then they're not learning anything, right? And if they're not learning anything, then you're not delivering better learning efficacy. So that's, I think, become the core as we are looking at it. So now it's not a matter of, hey, there's a mandate and we have to meet the mandate. Now it is for the edtech companies, it has also become a question of product adoption. And it has therefore become a question of, revenue for them. So I think the company which has that futuristic view of the market, I think they're going to win in this market because they are investing ahead of time. Just look at the assessment business. It's completely collapsed during those 2-3 years, right? And, we are all now questioning the most accepted way of doing assessments because everything is going digital.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at some of the damage done over the last couple of years and the significant learning loss that was universal. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic strata were, you still had learning loss. The degree may have been different, but addressing the need is critical. Recapturing that opportunity in the timelines that people have available to them, given our traditional educational system, are finite. If you were a ninth grader 2 years ago, you lost 2 years of your high school experience, and you only have 2 years left to make it up. That's a tremendous challenge, not just for this individual student, the high school as an institution, but also in matriculating towards a college experience. How do you fill that gap? How do you remediate that? And what role can some of these technology solutions play if you can get access to them? And to your point, Acky, that inclusive access, our ability to ensure that everyone has access to the tools they need to ensure an effective and efficient learning outcome is one of the few opportunities we have to remediate some of the damage done over the last 2 years with the pandemic.
In regards to things such as infrastructure and the equitability that were there before pre-pandemic, it's not like the pandemic just exposed that, but obviously with legitimately the overnight shift to an online learning environment that has now transitioned back to more of that pre-pandemic for most of the country, being back to face-to-face in the classroom again with some intermingling of a hybrid view of the technology. And this is a question for both of you, as we see the next 5 years unfold in the education space, the investments that are being made by the industry for inclusive access and making the material more affordable and accessible. And then Acky, thinking about it from a partnership side of the house that Magic sits on, what does the next 5 years look like, assuming we continue to see the trends towards more technology, less print?
So, the interesting dynamic in the industry is that print's never going to go away completely. Right? There's, at least from where we sit at McGraw Hill, there's still that experience and the classroom focused nature, especially in the younger grade levels, where you need some paper products. You need a textbook you can flip through. And to technology enable that classroom, over the course of the last 15, 20 years, we've made a tremendous amount of progress. getting towards that point where devices are ubiquitous and every student in every classroom might have something that they can leverage to get digital sides of things covered. I see that trend continuing. The funding related to the CARES Act has a lot to do with additional insurance around infrastructure, making sure bits and bytes can flow through the pipes and get the digital equity established so that our technology-based solutions can be more ubiquitous. There's also a notion of the teacher population adopting those things. And there was a dramatic forcing function with the pandemic that the reluctant teacher was literally forced to step into a new world and embrace some of these things. So for the next several years, I see the facility of our educators with the technology-based solutions increasing dramatically by virtue of the necessity. And as they get better at it, their demands of the technology are going to be more robust, and our capabilities to support them effectively and efficiently need to expand. And that all is kind of a virtuous cycle that's going to feed the equity base as these solutions become more effectively used in the classroom to achieve learning outcomes. What's your perspective, Acky?
I have always talked about the last mile problem in the technology world, where very basic stuff like does every student have a device to access, learning material? This is because you're talking about digital, but Andrew, to your point, everybody would also have, a print book with them. And I'll give you some examples of that. But first of all, inequity, is defined and is reflected very often, very big time on the last mile. Does everybody have a device to access? Second is, does everybody have network, which is good enough for them to access the learning material and work on it? And this had been a stumbling block. And during pandemic, many districts across the country and even at the college level, I think a lot of them, they went out of the way to fix that hole within the infrastructure. It's still not resolved fully, but I think we are in a much better place because many emergency funds were diverted to make that infrastructure happen in many of the counties. Mm-hmm. And I think we moved in a much better place now than what we were 3 years back. So I think I would say that's a blessing coming out of the pandemic. I think the other thing is that we touched this a little bit earlier. Technology allows you to scale and make it also affordable. So in some ways, you also can leapfrog, and jump to the next level, of technology adoption in places where there's none. So given that, we also, and McGraw Hill also has exposure to the international market, you would have seen that in some of the places, some of the countries abroad, the leapfrogging in terms of technology has been much better. Mm-hmm. Because they don't have anything to, discard. They don't have any legacy to carry on. So I think in some ways we've seen, for example, India is an example where, online learning has just gone through the roof. And I think that adoption of technology is becoming very ubiquitous out there as far as digital learning is concerned.
Yeah, it's an interesting example, too, because they kind of leapfrogged the traditional wired network and went straight to cellular as well. So yes, very interesting evolution from that perspective for EdTech.
And with the evolution of technology, with the evolution of access, I've got one last question here before we get ready to wrap up, would be a little bit around lifelong learning. The journey has always been at K through 20, and then you move into, wherever your career is going to take you. That's turned itself on its head in higher education, where, that's not necessarily everyone's path anymore. Particularly now with what the pandemic has done. Would love to just, leave our listeners wanting a little bit more from the two of you and potentially bring you both back for another time on this. But, where do you see the lifelong learning journey, going in the future? And then this is a question for both of you to spitfire a little bit.
It's interesting. I think it's not even in the future. It's today. The transition to notions of certification programs, badging, the ability to get a boot camp experience where you're very tightly coupling a high intensity period of in very specific and pointed learning to change a career path. We've actually been working with several boot camps and hiring former teachers who've transitioned to the software development career with a 14-week program. That not going for a 4-year bachelor's degree in computer science, but coming in day one with the skills and experience, frankly, to be professional software engineers. They know how to write code, commit code, collaborate on testing the code and delivering software solutions. It's a tremendous shift in the way the traditional education pipeline has functioned historically, and that trend is only going to continue. Industry continues to push for assurances that students are exiting their learning experiences with specific skills that are directly aligned with the business need, and carving up kind of the traditional higher education degree granting program into more discrete deliverables. We have a solution called SimNet, which simulates the Microsoft Office experience in a teaching way. So we teach you how to use the Microsoft Office suite, and we're seeing professionals coming to us asking for a badge that certifies that they know how to use Excel at an expert level, because they can use that as leverage in conversations with their employer about future career path and promotion. That trend, I think, is only going to continue.
I think lifelong learning is already here. We are no more depending on our traditional 4-year degrees. Even when I'm looking at our own workforce, we are continuously assessing, where our team members are from their skill set perspective, or as they call it, skill stack perspective. And I think even if we were not there to guide it, I think today, if you look at what's going on in the business, there's a massive amount of disruption going on. There's a lot of opportunities available for talent to move around and seek new opportunities. I'll again go back to the whole experience of pandemic, where many people have come out of pandemic questioning what they want to do in their lives. We talked about the big resignations, or how people are thinking about their choices in their life. Even making decisions to move away completely from their chosen, current career path to a completely new career path, balancing work and life. And I see this as a continuous thing, which is, every 3-5 years, I may choose to do something different because the industry's evolved, something new has come up, there's a better opportunity out there. And so I would intersperse my life with some learning and then, do something different. So I think, we all have to adapt to that, whether we are employers or whether we are educators, and whether I'm a learner or I'm a worker. And I think we have to see this as a lifelong commitment to building our skill stack. Sorry about that.
Totally agree.
That's great insight. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. So last question for both of you. I'll start with Acky. So Acky, when you're on your pedestal and you have the opportunity to speak to your counterparts, what would be one parting thought or advice you would have for them regarding, the future of education and technology?
So I mean, assuming, if I'm talking to an investor who's looking at investing in, building an EdTech product, I would always say that, like Andrew mentioned earlier, that don't get carried away with AI or those kind of things. Blockchain is another thing that I keep hearing a lot in my business. I think remain focused on the purpose of us being in this business of EdTech, which is delivering learners' efficacy. I think if you're focused on that and then build product around that, think about that first. And learning has to be a happy journey and happy experience for the learner. You don't necessarily want it to be a crying experience. So I think you want to ensure that people are enjoying the journey, and while they are at it, their learning efficacy is improved by your product or by your solution. So I think as long as you're focused on that, and it may not always be technology that always solves the problem. It may be a combination of bringing the right kind of ecosystem, operations, processes, everything to work together to make that happen.
Thank you.
I think that's
Andrew,
really well
same
said.
question.
Yeah, really well said, Acky. My constant refrain with my teams and my peers is that we need to avoid gratuitous application of technology. There's a lot of conversation around what the metaverse means to the future of education. Talk about the equity issues of that in another conversation. But just from a technology perspective, what is the metaverse going to provide that enhances, that optimizes, that makes more efficient, that makes more entertaining and delightful, to Aki's happy comments, the learning moment, the learning experience? It's not enough to use an AR camera and put a sphere on the desk. What do you do with the sphere? What learning can be accomplished in that mode using that technology that you can't do in other ways? How can you enhance the understanding of a concept by application of the technology? That's a constant conversation for me with my teams, and ensuring that we don't get lost and enamored with the latest buzzwords or cool programming languages. We've got to really soak in and be in relationship with the ultimate user of our solution, understanding their needs, their wants, their desires, and address those. Solve the real problems. Let's not create new problems for them because of the cutting edge technology that doesn't quite work right. Talk about a frustration that our students don't need, our teachers don't need. Let's make sure that the applications are seamless, as transparent as we can make them, and reinforcing the learning experience.
Andrew and Acky, thank you for joining me today for the latest Tech and EdTech podcast. We appreciate your insight and look forward to you and our audience joining us in future podcasts. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Acky.